What if I told you that you could accelerate your career by using a tool that you were born with and something that you've probably overlooked, but something that you could use right now? If you cannot speak in depth on this topic as it relates to yourself, you are missing out on a massive opportunity to demonstrate your value to employers. Today's topic is our personality. Now, I've certainly used personality to my advantage throughout my career, but it has also proven to be my most reliable form of birth control. It's kind of like Frank's Red Hot. You can use that shit for everything. So, are you ready to learn all about personality and how it can be this tremendous asset for your career? Well, ready or not, here we go. Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Larry. Welcome back to the channel and our video series, Careers in Companies. And today's topic, which is one of my absolute favorites when we're breaking down the Mars model. When I teach organizational behavior, personality is just one chapter in the textbook, but I keep bringing it up in almost every chapter in almost any conversation, especially about self-discovery, as well as observing behavior in others. And I keep bringing it up for a few different reasons. Number one, you can connect it to almost any kind of behavior, whether you're talking about conflict or leadership or emotions. Personality seems to have some kind of component. So you can do a lot with the learning that comes with this chapter. Secondly, I find it to be an approachable topic and it's kind of fun. It's a bit gamified because we're going to do personality tests and inventories and get a score, and we'll talk about what those scores mean. But it's also one of those kind of nature nurture things. As I said earlier in the intro, it's something that you're born with, not entirely what you're born with, but that's a big part of it. So there's an element of it is what it is. So this is really good practice on this channel where we're trying to get used to self-evaluation and self-reflection to be able to just see things for what they are and not be so judgmental. We want to observe, we don't want to judge. Now, when you do get personality test scores, it does come with a little bit of anxiety because you think you're being rated based on your score. So there is a little bit of critiquing that goes on, but don't worry about it. It's not too intense, and I will help you through that process. Everybody, meaning all of you out there, should have intimate knowledge of your personality profile. If you can't describe your personality based on some kind of scientific, and I said scientific framework, then you're missing out on some critical insights that can help you in so many ways in your career. Starting out with number one, choosing the right career. Also, it can just help you make better decisions on the job, can help you become a more authentic leader and a better teammate. It can help you be seen the right way by the people who are in charge of your career. And lastly, and most importantly, it can help you uncover some of the hidden value that we all have. And I'll talk about that at the end as the payoff for this entire topic. Now, let's kick off with a general orientation to personality. It's a tiny bit academic, but we'll get past it really quickly. So, what is personality? Personality becomes apparent over time as an enduring pattern of behaviors in response to situations in life. It also takes into account the psychological and emotional processes that go on behind the scenes to inform this behavior. Now, we hear the words behavior and personality. What is the relationship between the two? Behavior happens in the moment. So I am behaving right now, and you are behaving right now, regardless of what it is that you're doing. Personality is a pattern of behaviors over time, or whatever our natural default is. So, for example, some people are naturally extroverted, even though they may be introverted or act that way every now and again. Some people are naturally disciplined, organized, creative. You get the idea. Now, you can't judge someone for what their personality is because there's a component of it that you were born with. But what you can do is you can criticize or maybe judge their behaviors because behavior is voluntary and it happens in the moment. So here's an example. Say you're having a conversation with somebody, they're really annoying you. Your personality could send you in the direction of wanting to punch them in the face. Now, we at Upmarket do not advocate for punching people in the face. It is counterproductive to any working relationship, but in most jurisdictions, it is also illegal. So do not punch people in the face. Hopefully, you guys know that. So, our personality may make us want to do that, and we've all been there before. Am I right? But you have to override your personality. You have to look at a situation, assess what is right, and make the right choice of behavior in that moment. So that's what the Mars model is all about. studying the elements that inform our behavior so that we can see them coming and instantly override them and do the right thing in the right situation to be most productive for our careers in that moment. Next, there are over 2,000 different personality dimensions. Now, the Big Five personality framework that I'm going to introduce formally in a second groups them into five major dimensions or traits. So within those five categories, there are tons of variations and nuances, but we'll identify six subtraits in each of the five dimensions for 30 subtraits in total, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others. I'm not trying to make you guys a PhD in personality, but we will get really far on this topic by just working with this maximum of 30. Third, as we talked about, personality has a nature and nurture component. It's about 70% nature, about 30% nurture, meaning about 30% of your personality is shaped by your environment and your life experiences. But that nature component is seen right from birth. Now, if any of you have siblings, you can attest to this. Certainly, this was the case in my family. My sister was the oldest when she was born. She never cried. She was super quiet. She was really easygoing, go with the flow. My mom's like, parenting is really easy. I'm going to have like 10 of these. And then my brother comes along, and right from the time he was in the womb, he was like doing parkour, right? And then when he was born, he was like screaming and crying and full of energy. And my mother had to rethink her choices. Incidentally, I was like the third one to come along. I was a bit of an oops because my mother had two already in diapers. So she had her hands full. Thank God for Catholic lack of regard for birth control. Otherwise, I simply would not have existed. Anyway, number 4, personality is difficult to change. The older you get, this is why you get older people that talk about being stuck in their ways. It's pretty much the case from a personality standpoint, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can still work on your personality. So one of the reasons we're even talking about this topic is that if you understand your personality and understand how it's an asset for you, but also in some cases a liability, you can work on your personality and develop new habits so that you can effectively change your personality. So for me, I always had a degree of empathy, but I really needed more. So I've worked on my empathy over time, and it's become much more natural for me. I used to be a bit of a procrastinator. A lot of you have problems with discipline. I'm generally disciplined, but I do have a procrastination side to me. I've worked in a dedicated way on that, and I've improved it over time, such that when I take personality tests now, my scores are changing because of the work that I've been doing on myself, and the same would apply to you. And the last one, number 5, as a part of our orientation, is there is no universally right or wrong personality. There's no universally better or worse personality profile. Everything is contextual. So when you get personality test scores, don't freak out about whatever the scores say, because any score can be really good. Any score can work against you. It depends on the situation. It depends on the job. It depends on the context. So, having said that, for certain types of jobs, like if you're an entrepreneur or an accountant or a manager or a marketer, we'll talk a little bit toward the end that there's certain types of personality dimensions that can really work for you more than others. So, if your personality doesn't line up, you either want to work on your personality to be more successful, or in worst case scenarios, you want to think about changing careers. But we should all have a development plan. And your development plan should also take into account some of your personality based behaviors because you want to make those behaviors as advantageous for you in your career as possible. Let's switch gears and now talk about personality models and tests. Now, there's a bunch of them out there. There's two that you've probably heard of. We will recognize them both, but we're going to focus on one going forward. Some of you may have heard of the five-factor personality model, also known as the Big Five. This is the one we're going to be using. But most of you, if you've heard of any personality test, have probably used MBTI, which is Myers-Briggs, and that's an inventory that you can take. But to my knowledge, it doesn't influence a lot of meaningful organizational change. It's kind of cute. It's overly simplified. It's gamified. It puts everybody into little boxes. But importantly, it is not scientifically recognized. Now, I don't want to trash it a whole lot on this channel. Instead, I will link a very short video from Vox in the description that outlines the limitations of Myers-Briggs and why you shouldn't overly rely on it. It's a cute and fun test. I personally wouldn't use it for any serious purpose. Now, Big Five comes across a little bit more judgmental than MBTI, and that's probably because you get a score. And I think this is why many organizations steer clear of it. We're afraid of getting a score. I say get over it. Don't be afraid to have a suboptimal personality for your job or your career. Let's just look at our scores without judgment and just see it for what it is. And then let's thrive on our strengths and then let's work on our limitations so we can make our jobs and our careers better. That's what personal development is about. That's what growth is about. That's what this channel is about. And really, that's what life is about. Now, if you want to get the most out of this video, I recommend you pause now and go do a personality test. You don't have to if you don't want to. I just recommend it. The better personality tests will take at least 15 to 20 minutes to do on average. Anything less than that, and the results will be too generalized. But the best scientific tests will take up to an hour to do, but who's got time for that? So I will put a link in the description to the test that I use in my courses. It takes about 20 minutes to do. This is not an endorsement of the test's scientific validity, but it'll give you a really good sense of direction in terms of where you are at. Now, if you choose to do that particular test, you're going to get 5 scores out of 120. And within each of those 5 dimensions, there are 6 subdimensions, and you'll get a score on each of the 6 out of 20. So 6 times 20 equals 120. So you're going to get 30 scores in total, 5 scores out of 120, and then 6 scores for each one out of 20. So it's going to give you a lot to work with when it comes time to analyzing the results. Once again, don't worry about if your score is higher or lower. Just answer the questions authentically. Don't think about what is the right answer, what is true for you as you know yourself in that particular moment when you're doing the test. Any personality profile is a strength. Any personality profile has limitations to it, and that's the point of understanding your results and having this discussion in this video. So if you don't want to do the test right now, don't worry. You can still get a ton of learning in this video on this subject once we complete it. And if you get the hang of it, you're going to be able to recognize personality influence behaviors in yourself and in others. That's how you'll know when you're really starting to understand this subject. It's like when you see something and you can't unsee it, you will see people behave and you'll start to profile their personality dimensions. Once you get to that point, you will know that you're really getting it. So, if you can, please take a minute or more like 20 minutes, go do the test, come back with your scores, and let's talk about it. And if not, that's okay. Let's just keep going with a down and dirty on each of the big 5 dimensions. So let's now introduce you to the first one, conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness is a measure of to what extent you have control over your impulses so that you can organize and apply yourself to accomplish tasks. If you are low conscientious, you may present as someone who simply does not have their shit together, and much to our collective sadness, that may just be the case. The good news is, you may be the type who can, in the words of the unwashed masses, go with the flow. If you are high conscientious, you likely thrive on accomplishments and details. Extremely high conscientious people, meanwhile, can be so impossibly disciplined that they have to schedule their hunger, their relaxation, their spontaneity, and even their thrice daily trips to the loo.
So I like to start here with conscientiousness, which by the way is not consciousness, it's conscientiousness. Consciousness is something completely different. But it's a good place to start because I feel this is one of the most important personality dimensions across many different types of jobs. In fact, there are studies in recruitment, I also teach recruitment and selection, that show that conscientiousness is one of the factors, not just among personality, but among all sorts of things, that is the highest coefficient of predictability of success across many different types of jobs. So for those of you who are out there who are in the recruitment industry, you should consider testing for this either through personality tests or the questions you ask in interviews. Okay, so here is the list of 6 most common subtraits. Many of them are pretty easy to understand. I'm not going to go through all of them in a ton of depth, but I will explain some of them a little bit to make sure we're all clear on what they mean. So the first one is cautiousness. And that is not strictly about hesitancy, but it's to what extent you think through your actions and your decisions. So I have this friend who bought a car. Well, this was about 10 years ago. Her older car needed to be junked. She was buying a newer one. She was willing to spend a lot of money, but she wanted to make sure she got good value. Well, this woman had a spreadsheet and she listed all the different cars, all the different features and functions of each car, and how important each one was to her, and how much she would pay for each upgrade in feature and function. She had this massive spreadsheet to figure out what car that she was going to buy. She even had things like value adds. Did they give you a new iPad if you bought the car? So she was factoring everything into the value. Now, this can be a wonderful thing, but this can also paralyze you sometimes in your decision. So once again, cautiousness is neither good nor bad. None of the subdimensions are universally good or bad. You could see how thinking through decisions makes a lot of sense because she's going to get a lot of good value for her car. But sometimes you get this analysis paralysis. That happened to her. Eventually, there was an intervention. One of my other friends, after a year of her, obsessing over these spreadsheets and figuring out which car she wanted to buy, he just showed up at her house because he knew which brand she wanted, and he was like, "Sweetie, get your checkbook. We are going to buy a car today. You are leaving the dealership driving a new vehicle," and that was almost exactly what happened. The next one is self-efficacy. To what extent do you feel that you can get things done? This is a little bit linked to your self-concept that we talked about earlier. I have a lot of self-efficacy, and in fact, I stumbled upon this actually when I was in an interview. I just started talking about it. I forget how it came up, but I came up with some kind of line that was like, "You just show me where my desk is and give me my objectives, and I will just make sure I get the shit done, and I'll call you if I need anything." Now, I had to fine tune that message a little bit, but it was, like, eye-opening. It was like I almost felt like the way I answered that question, like, "I'll just take care of shit, like, don't worry about it," that supervisors and managers and leaders really responded to that. Like I said, I fine-tuned the message to make it not sound like I was a wild horse just running out of the barn and I was just gonna disrupt the company. Um, but I left them feeling like I've totally got this, and that's something that I truly believe inside of me. And it was funny, I was talking about this as an example in one of my classes, and a student came to me a couple weeks later. He had applied for a job at Nike, like in the retail store. So it was a young student, it was a retail job. And he said he even answered like that in an interview. He said something like, "You just have to tell me once, and I will make sure that it's done." And he said the person interviewing him just kinda went like, "Whoa," and he felt like that changed the whole energy in the interview, and not too long after that, they just asked him, like, "When can you start?" So I'm not saying that's exactly what did it, but the student really felt that that made a big difference in the interview. Now, you can't just say this stuff in interviews, you also have to live it, right? You have to deliver on those behaviors once you get into the job. Another subdimension is orderliness. So, assuming you're not like OCD and you're over the top with orderliness, because that could be if you're too high in that dimension, that could cause some problems. But otherwise, you're pretty great at structure and systems. And I discovered this actually just through working. I didn't realize that I had this dimension in myself. By the way, I'm overall super high conscientiousness. So I'm high in all the different dimensions, but I like to organize stuff. I like to structure things, and I was my first job ultimately became internal operations, and it's something I really became passionate about and something that I'm still really interested in, how organizations work, and it's a part of why I'm even launching a channel like this, because I wanna dive into that a little bit more and ultimately help organizations with this. Um, but it comes to me not through just my job experiences, but I notice different types of things. Like, for example, I don't eat submarine sandwiches anymore. Here's This is a really wacky story that just shows you how weird I am. By the way, it says, like, "Own your crazy" over right here, if I'm pointing correctly. Own your crazy? I'm crazy, okay? So let me explain to you why I'm crazy, and it's because of my orderliness. So I used to do this when I used to eat more bread. I don't eat a lot of bread now. So you go to a sub shop, and when you're ordering a sub, what most people say is, "I'll just have a foot long, ham and Swiss on rye," or whatever it is that you're ordering for the sub. But the way I look at things, I think about how the employee puts the sub together. The first thing they think about is, "I need to go get the bread," because there's usually different bread options, right? There's your whole wheat and your honey oat and your regular plain white and all this sort of stuff. So I would order in the order that they needed to think about it, because that would just be much more efficient in building the sub. And you may notice this if you walk in and you go, "Give me a foot long ham and Swiss on, rye," or whatever it is you're ordering, depending on the cognitive abilities or how the brain works of the person who's serving you, they just may stop and go like, "Okay, wait, what kind of bread did you want? Did you say rye?" And then they'll go get the bread, and then they'll stop and they'll go, "Oh, what did you want on that? Turkey, roast beef?" And then, because they just think about things in a certain order. Some people can take all of that information into their brain and just get it, and some people think of things one thing at a time. So I'm an orderly person, so I adapt to that. So I go, "Hmm, I haven't decided what I want on it yet, but I want like foot long whole wheat." And then they're cool. They go get the bread, and then they're looking at me, and I go, "Can I get ham and cheese?" And then they put that on there, and then I tell them the toppings. Just a weird way that I do things. I have a real process mind. I'm like that when I drive. We'll talk about driving a lot on this channel and certainly in this video. Even things like, I kind of laugh. If you go to the gym and you'll see a lot of the free weights, not the dumbbells, but the weights that you would put on barbells, they're organized by like 45s if you're in North America, 45s, 35s, 25s, 10s. They're all grouped together. So, of course, when I'm using, a barbell and I'm using 45s or 35s, I will put them all back to the 45s or with the 45s, etc. But there's so many people in the gym that will be using a 25 and then they'll just load it back on, the section of plates that have all the 45s. And that makes me nuts. I don't know if you guys are like this at all, but I'm like, what? I want to get into people's brains. It's like, what about your brain makes you think that putting this 25 with all the 45s makes a lot of sense? Because when people need to get a 45, they're gonna have to pull off the 25 and grab the 45, if you follow what I'm saying. That stuff makes me nuts, and now that I understand personality more, and people just don't have the conscientiousness, especially in the orderliness sub-dimension, I just kinda shrug and go, "This is just the way some people's personalities work." The last one that we'll talk about in conscientiousness is dutifulness, which is also related to your discipline and your reliability. Now, this is the cornerstone of how we build trust in the workplace, and it's something that makes other people want to have you on their team. So, conscientiousness has a lot to do with the personal guardrails that we have for ourselves. So, something you can reflect on is what are your non negotiables? What are things that you will do no matter what? So, for me, a simple example in my personal life is I don't go to bed without brushing my teeth and making sure my kitchen is clean. What about you? For me, my guardrails make me go to work every day, but I don't have enough guardrails in terms of making sure I get to the gym every day that I want to go to the gym or I feel that I need to. So, what are the things you can talk yourself out of? What are the things that are non negotiable? Are you laying in bed going, well, I came to work like 6 days in a row, so maybe it's time for me to take a day off? How easily can you have that conversation? And when you're at work, do you make sure all your emails get taken care of? Do you make sure that you are on top of everything? That you meet all deadlines, or if you have a simple obstacle, do you overcome it and work double down your efforts to overcome it? Or you go, "Oh, I had an obstacle, so there's my reason for not getting this done." This is something that is looked at in the workplace, and I will be talking about it more in this channel because it's one of those stealth things that can make a big difference in your career. So one of the reasons why I'm really high dutiful, here's some examples in the workplace. I won't give you all the details because they're longer stories, and maybe I'll tell them in a better context some other time. But I had a situation a couple of years ago where my mother suddenly died. Like, her health was not very good, but she died very quickly. This happened on a Sunday night. I was teaching one class Monday afternoon and 2 classes on Tuesday, so obviously I canceled both of those classes to go be with her and make funeral arrangements. She was about 90 minutes away from where I live here in Toronto. But the following week, it turns out the way the schedules worked, we were burying her on Monday morning. I could not let myself cancel classes for 2 weeks in a row. We were getting close to exam time. That was a non-negotiable for me. So as devastated as I was, I forced myself to compartmentalize. I buried my mother at 10:30 in the morning on a Monday, got myself together, went for an early lunch with some family members, and then drove 90 minutes and taught a class, in the afternoon at 2:30. I barely remember teaching the class and also got through 2 more classes the next day. I just did it because nobody told me I had to. It's just my guardrails. It's like, this is gonna happen no matter what. And then there's another time, and this is a longer story, and I'm just gonna give you the headlines, and you're gonna be like, "What? Tell me more." But this is fact and not hyperbole, but at one point in my career, I was probably about 25 years old when I was head of internal operations for Scotiabank in the Caribbean. There is a significant internal cash theft of about $100,000. Kind of a fascinating story, but as things turned out, when they figured out at what period of time the money grew feet and left the bank, there were only 3 people in the entire bank, and I was one of them. So I was a top suspect in a major cash theft that had our internal auditors all over it, and also we had the FBI involved. So believe it or not, fun fact about me, I have taken an FBI lie detector test. So someday I'll tell you all about it. It was harrowing, made me almost crazy. Anyway, the investigation went on for about 2.5 months. It was highly stressful. I was the head of the operation and we were dealing with a bunch of other issues at the time as well. I did not miss a single day of work. So we can look at dutifulness and say, wow, that's awesome, Larry. So obviously some leaders and they'd be like, I'd love to have you on our team because obviously you're pretty resilient. But it's more complicated than that because you could argue, especially with sort of the trauma that I went through and the challenges that I went through, I probably needed a few days off for my mental health. So I don't want to begrudge people who take those days. But it causes a problem sometimes in the workplace because it sets an unrealistic standard for the conditions under which somebody should get their job done or show up to work, complete tasks, meet deadlines, whatever, because people will point to me and say, well, Larry's coming to work and Larry's getting his shit done. And look at all the stuff that's going on in his life. You have obviously, we like to judge, a less intense issue going on in your life. Why is it that you need a day off? So that causes issues in the workplace. And if everybody comes to work under the most traumatic of circumstances, this becomes like an expectation from employers. So maybe this gives me some kind of competitive advantage when you look at things from a very small perspective, but big picture, I'm setting unrealistic expectations or at least contributing to that in the workplace. And sometimes other employees don't necessarily appreciate it. So once again, it's great to have any kind of score on a certain dimension, but there are some problems that can come with it. I realize it sounds like being high conscientious is something that everybody would appreciate. And to some degree, that's true. We preach on this channel and in business that some degree of conscientiousness, at least in some of the subdimensions, is valued in a lot of jobs. But if you are low conscientious, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to want to avoid you and you have no value to offer. The truth is, there are some benefits to being lower on the conscientious dimension. One of them is you can be pretty adaptable. Low conscientious people can be very go with the flow. So that allows you to adapt to changing circumstances, something I'll talk about later on in this channel on the importance of adaptability when it comes to the changes in technology and so many other things that are changing in the employment landscape. The other area that I will highlight is what we call disinhibition. So maybe that lack of self-discipline can actually be a positive thing once in a while. So the poster child for disinhibition is actually Donald Trump because he has some undisciplined habits in the way that he talks. So I'm not here to take any political sides, but Donald Trump is truly somebody that you can just observe and you can break down from a human behavior perspective and to learn a lot about how people behave and how the Mars model works in some people. So he is the poster child for disinhibition. There's a podcast by Ezra Klein from the New York Times. He goes into the big five personality and he applies it to people like Donald Trump and other people as well to show how Trump's lack of discipline, his disinhibition, is both sometimes a curse, but a cause for some of the loyalty that he has among his followers. It's a sort of charisma that he has that I know not everybody sees, but his followers do see it. And before the election, so this is like a while ago, a few years ago, he would talk about, yes, he would sort of ramble when he talks, but he's kind of doing the weave. And some people would find that really endearing. What can we say? So once again, don't freak out if you're low conscientious. There are some benefits to having that. And in certain conditions and certain types of jobs, it would absolutely be valued in select situations. Now let's move on to the next one. And let's tell you about agreeableness.
Agreeableness is an indicator of your sensitivity to others and awareness of relationships. Low agreeable individuals are competitive and have their heads so far up their arse that they tend to forget that other people matter, assuming they even bother to acknowledge their existence. High agreeable people, on the other hand, may be sensitive and caring, yes, but at the same time fairly useless at making decisions because of the sheer terror they feel over the thought of hurting the feelings of another person.
Unlike conscientiousness, where there's a general bias to wanting to have higher scores, this one is much, much more balanced so that for any subdimension, being super high or super low can come with both benefits and come with issues. So let's take trust as one of the subdimensions. You can probably immediately see how being really trusting, almost too trusting, can be a problem. You can almost see how being not trusting at all can be a problem. So I'm kind of mid score where I'm really trusting when it comes to personal relationships. I will give you the power to hurt me, but not when it comes to money. I am absolutely not trusting when it comes to money. So somebody's trying to con me into some investment and they're like, "Trust me, this is gonna, double your investment," or whatever it is, right? Even if it's something that's not so corny as that. I'm just like, "No, I absolutely the fuck do not trust you. So don't give me that bullshit. Don't inject trust into the conversation. It's not gonna happen." But here's where low trust and high conscientiousness come together because all of our personality dimensions don't operate independently. They do come together. So here's a story of years ago when I bought a new car, when I bought my current car. So my car's older, so I bought it a while ago. I was living in Philadelphia and I had to call the insurance company to update my insurance. So I called them. At that time, I was paying by check every month. So now you have an idea of how old my car was. There was no automatic debit. So I call them. And I'm like, "Okay, here's all the details of my new car. How much is the updated insurance amount?" They tell me. And so I'm being very because I'm high conscientious, I'm being very specific. I'm on the phone and I'm like, "Okay, do I need to pay something now? Do I need to mail a check now? Like, what do we do?" And the guy says, "No, don't worry about it. We're just gonna send you your new bill, and when the new bill comes in, it'll have the new amount, and you can send the check in at that time." So because I'm conscientious, I'm like, "Okay, just to make sure, you're telling me I am covered as of today for my new car, but I do not have to pay anything today." And he says, "That is absolutely correct." And I said, "Cool." Now, because I'm low trust and high conscientious, I'm like, "What is your name?" Got his name. The time of the call, I took all the details down, spoke with, I don't know, Shane on Thursday, September the 9th at, 4:23 PM. Like, I had all of those notes written down because what happens? I get off the phone with this guy. I get an email a couple of days later that all of my coverage has been canceled because I have non-payment. I have this new car and I have not paid. It worked out in this case. So I call them up, I give them all the details. I spoke with Shane on this date at this time, and this is what I was told. And they were like, "Yeah, right. That's not what you were told." But because it's an insurance company, they're able to record the calls. And so they would pull the call and call me back. And it was so funny. The guy calls me back and he's like, we pulled a call and it seems that you are correct. And in fact, we are going to be using the recording of this telephone call for training purposes in the future, right? So I am on top of my shit. When somebody tells me something and it has to do with my money, I verify it. Like I got a new mortgage. They told me something about the mortgage that I could convert it from variable to fixed rate at any time. The guy tells me that. I don't believe anything I'm told, right? So when I get the mortgage document that I have to sign, I am reading all like 20 pages of the mortgage document, all the fine print. And I call the guy and I'm like, "Where does it say in this contract that I can convert to fixed at any given time?" And he's like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Put that in the document." And he's like, "Oh, we can't do that." And we got into a super big argument, right? I don't believe anything I'm told, especially when it comes to money. That's just me. So sometimes that's me being a little bit paranoid. Sometimes that's me being, really conscientious and really smart. Also, with agreeableness, there's this idea of being candid. And candid is about being truthful and transparent and just being honest and just being real with people. The disagreeable side of you comes into play when number one, you don't give a shit about anybody else's feelings, or number two, when you become somewhat candid, but you're a little bit more manipulative. You're being more competitive and you're showing what we call dark triad behaviors, where you're just looking out for yourself and you don't have the other person's interests at heart. So you see a little bit of this in social media. This is something that makes me bristle a bit when people are like, "I used to be all about other people. Now I'm just about myself. I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going to do my thing." And they just go on like this, right? And it sounds very empowering. And people are like, "Yeah, you be you." But first of all, that is not authentic, especially when we talk about leadership. I'll talk about and present authentic leadership to you in that module. It's not about just saying and doing whatever random thing you want because you're just being truthful to yourself. No, that's actually being disagreeable because you're showing also that you don't give a shit about other people. And that's not necessarily somebody you want to be friends with, that you want to work with, or somebody that you want leading you. So authentic leadership, just to give you a little bit of a preview, is like this balance between understanding who you are and communicating who you are and recognizing how other people are important so that you represent yourself truthfully, but in a way that is approachable to other people and in a way that also adapts to who they are as well. Anyway, we'll get more into that at another time. Another feature of low agreeable people, people who show signs of anger and impatience, and those like emotions and feelings are triggered readily. It's also seen in people who are fiercely independent, which means they can also be uncooperative in the workplace. And it's also a sign of competitiveness. And you can see this especially when people drive. You can learn a lot about people's personalities by watching them drive, especially if they're low agreeable. They're like weaving in and out of traffic because they've got to get to work, I don't know, a minute and a half ahead of the next person who's beside them. They'll just do these sudden moves. They don't really care if they cut people off or if they disrupt the overall traffic flow. They just need to get where they're going and they also need to win, right? This can also be seen as a positive thing. If you're hiring for a job that's maybe on Wall Street or in Canada, Bay Street, some of these jobs are naturally competitive and they're not about, teamwork. It's about your own personal individual goals. So maybe low agreeable is the right thing that you need for that particular job or situation. But overall, you should watch for this when you're interviewing people because when you ask them questions like, what are your greatest weaknesses? Sometimes if we have a hard time coming up with something, or even if we've thought about it, one of the things people will commonly say is, well, I just get impatient a lot. I've done that in interviews. That's not as benign as you might think it is. I would pause and dig into that and ask them follow up questions to really understand if this is important in the job. Do they need to be agreeable? Or is agreeableness not really that important? Because if they're not interested in other people, if they're not easily able to work with other people and in different types of situations, that's a red flag. So you might need to dig into it. Altruism. Now, this is an interesting subtrait and it has big career and life implications. You want to know your score on this one. If you are low altruism, what that basically means is you don't get a kick out of helping and supporting other people. Now, this can cause issues in the workplace when it comes to leadership and teamwork and your general ability to be a good corporate citizen. So you want to think about if that matters in your organization. So another place where altruism does come in is in discussions about happiness. So I'm going to produce a video later on that synthesizes all the different things we know about happiness. And there's recommendations about how to make your life happier. One of the recommendations, and I've used this before, and it does work for me, if you're down in the dumps, if you think everything is against you in life, go help someone. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, and you have to be careful. Sometimes people get really angry because they want help, right? But sometimes if you go help other people, it gives you a boost. It works. However, if you are low altruism, this proves to be fairly useless advice because people won't get it because they get nothing out of helping and supporting other people. So you need to know that about someone before you dispense that kind of advice. And before we move on to the next one, I do want to say that agreeableness is becoming hotter and hotter in the workplace, both in Canada and in the United States, because we have thriving service economies. And in fact, much of the job growth, probably about 80% of it, is happening in empathetic careers, things like teaching and educational services, healthcare, support work, those types of things. That's where the job growth is, and that's where it's expected to be in the future. The more human type jobs, as so many of the non human jobs are being replaced by AI. So this will be a more important personality dimension and something you want to be attuned to and also working on if you're not super high on the agreeableness side. Also, this is going to be something that'll be more valued in leaders as we try to transition away from having toxic workplaces. Now, the challenge is, on average, women tend to score slightly higher than men, on average, on agreeableness. It's not like all women are agreeable, all men are disagreeable. We're just talking about like a slight variation. So if you are low agreeable, again, you either need to go work on independent jobs or go work on Wall Street, accounting, things where you don't have to work with a lot of people. But again, those jobs are starting to disintegrate. But that may be a better fit for you. Otherwise, you might want to think about working on that personality dimension and incubating some curiosity and interest in other people. Now let's move on to the next one, which is neuroticism, not eroticism, neuroticism.
Let's try to restrain ourselves from assuming that neurotic people have simply lost their damn minds. Although this may be true from time to time, what neuroticism genuinely means is our emotional variability and our predisposition to moods, which can often be negative. While low neurotic people might sound favorable to you because they tend to be calm and controlled, friends and leaders, they can often be rather boring. In some cases, they might have the air of someone who is certifiably dead on the inside. High neurotic people can actually be quite fun, you know. They can anticipate problems, even if they are imagining the majority of them, while their spontaneity can bring some needed energy to a team that's stuck in one place.
It's one of these traits that does scare people away and into the arms of MBTI because it's not exactly an approachable dimension. And I realize that the term neurotic, if I call you neurotic, that feels like a diss, right? It comes with a lot of baggage, unlike some of the other four traits, but it is, at the end of the day, a clinical term. There are other big five models that will change the terminology here and they'll refer to it as emotional stability. It's a little softer, but yeah, it still comes with a bit of baggage. If you are high neurotic, you are more prone to some negative emotions and feelings like anxiety, depression, low self esteem, and even addiction. So, a valuable thing to reflect on here, and there's a lot of reflection that comes with this personality dimension, you really got to spend time with it, is try to think about what, if anything, people, situations, events triggers these sorts of negative emotions and feelings, and to what degree, or what makes us feel self conscious or really insecure and vulnerable. So you start there, and if you come up with anything, then you have to go to the next part, which is even tougher and takes a lot more reflection and maybe even some time with a therapist. Not only what triggers you, but why. So, why is one of those generally powerful questions you can use in a lot of different places in society and in our lives and careers, certainly applies here. So, one of the main reasons why we suffer from anxiety and depression, you will find, aside from your current life situation, aside from maybe some traumatic events that have happened in your life, is unresolved fear and anger. That one gets us a lot. And if we don't work on it, if we don't understand it, it just multiplies and can just completely paralyze your life. So we're not going to go down a path too far when it comes to mental health. There's a bunch of stuff I want to cover in mental health, but we'll do that much later in this video series. But for now, I want to leave you with an excerpt of a video from a well-known Canadian psychologist. I believe his name is pronounced Gabor Mate. Listen to how this guy talks about it.
For someone who has heard us speak today and something connected with them, something you said spoke to them and they thought, wow, yeah, you know what? I'm carrying around old stuff with me today. I don't express my emotions. I'm not living a life that is true to me.
Yeah.
What are some of your final words for them?
Well, it's the word that you used, curiosity. So, not why am I living this way, but why am I living this way? What happened to me? What am I carrying here? So, the key phrase is precisely the one that you introduced, the necessity to be curious.
Yeah.
In a compassionate way. So you don't do an interrogation of yourself like you're a prosecuting detective of why did you or why did you not, but compassionately, why did you not?
Yeah.
Why did you? And if you ask these questions compassionately and with curiosity, the answers will emerge, as will the capacity for you to make different choices as you move forward. So where there wasn't choice before because you were compelled or driven, now you can have some freedom if you're willing to be curious.
So the big takeaway there is having compassionate conversations with yourself. That's the big thing. And that's what we have difficulty doing because we're always looking for things like, blame and judgment. Really want to unwire you, if that's a word, from thinking that way. Just observing things, just understanding where some of these emotions are coming from, and hopefully that can unlock all kinds of life and career potential. So again, take your time with this one. Just ease into it. Just start to think about things if I'm inspiring you to do at least that. I have done that with my students. This is the area, the personality dimension they struggle with the most because there's a lot behind it. Otherwise, they're really into these personality conversations. So I get it. Take your time, be patient, be compassionate, and make this like a lifetime pursuit, and eventually you'll get there. By the way, do not assume that if somebody's high neurotic that you don't want to have them on your team because sometimes they can bring a little bit of juice and a little bit of focus to your team. In a similar way to when I'm procrastinating, I'm a little lower energy, I'm not super focused, and obviously I'm not being very productive. But once I have the stress of a looming deadline, then the focus becomes sharper and I become much more productive. But you don't want to wait for, these deadlines all the time. If you have somebody that you're working with who's got a little bit of neuroticism, they can anticipate some problems before anybody else sees them. They can see if the team is slowing down a little bit and maybe not on track to hit a deadline, and they can start worrying and panicking about that a little bit. Sometimes you have to manage their emotions a little bit, but don't just dismiss them because they are high or neurotic. Sometimes they see things and they worry about things that are absolutely legitimate. Similarly, don't assume anybody who is low neurotic is always preferable. So, yes, we do like it in leaders because they tend to be a little more calm and in control of their emotions. But sometimes low neurotic people can lack passion and sometimes initiative that goes with it. And if they are super low neurotic, you may know people who are like this. It's like they are dead inside, right? It's like, "Hello, are you with me? Do you get excited about anything? Are you hearing me?" They have no emotional spikes, positively or negatively. They're just like flatlined, right? So they're barely alive, and you can see how that can be problematic. Maybe sometimes in friendships, certainly in the workplace, we all wanna have a bit of passion. We wanna have a little bit of juice. So anyway, high neurotic, not always bad. Super low neurotic, not always good. Moving on to the next one, openness.
Openness is more than the basic willingness to try new things. It involves breaking rules and pursuing creativity without boundary. High openness individuals are also prone to deep thought and are intellectually curious about themselves and the world around them. For example, you are watching this video. Are you attentive to and engaged in the subject matter? Or are you staring blankly at the screen while the wind whistles unobstructed between your ears? And does this happen often? High openness individuals also tend to share their emotions, so pairing this trait with neuroticism in one person can result in some truly frightening interpersonal experiences for the ill-prepared.
Openness is a really interesting one because when you look at the subtraits, they don't automatically seem to go together. It's like they're a bit disconnected, but they come together into this one overall dimension that is not just about being open to new things, it's about creativity and being unconventional and craving the aesthetic. Also, like me, deep thinkers are high in openness. And that's where most of my high openness score comes from, just that one subdimension. I'm sort of mid-range in everything else. But because I like to go deep into certain types of topics, an example would be if any of you are watching YouTube late at night and you end up, we've all done this before, probably watching YouTube till like 3 o'clock in the morning when we should be sleeping. But what types of videos are you watching? Are you just looking at entertaining stuff or are you learning about different things? I know one night it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching all these videos on different Middle Eastern countries and how they were formed in terms of the land borders and the different tribes and different types of people in all the different communities and why some countries are better well off than others. It was fascinating. So remember, overall, just because you are high or generally high in one dimension, that doesn't mean you're super high in all the different subdimensions. So like I said, I'm moderate across a lot of the different openness dimensions, but I'm much, much higher on the intellectualism side and being a deep thinker. And that's why overall I have a generally high score. So people who are open can also be really adventurous, but in a way that's different from the way that extroverted people are. So adventurous people on the openness side are really liberal. They dislike tradition. They love to blow shit up in almost in a disorderly way. So people who are anti-establishment are that way in part because they are high openness. So if I give students a report to produce, like it's an essay or a group project that they have to do, I will have some students that will come to me and they'll just want to do it differently. They're like, "Can I present this like in a movie?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, sure. As long as you're meeting the criteria of the assignment, I'm not too worried about if you just handwrite it or if you perform it. You can, do a skit. I don't really care." So this is a sign that some people have openness. Gen Z in general is pretty high openness. They have a lot of high openness qualities because they're questioning everything. And I'll talk about that in another video about why I love Gen Z so much. But just simple things like, why do we need to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? So high openness people will just start asking these types of questions. I have to say, there's a really interesting interplay between people who are high openness and people who are high conscientious. They don't often work well together in the workplace. Now, I'm reasonably high openness, but I'm super high conscientious. My conscientiousness probably dominates a little bit more. But in organizations, we tend to default to hiring the conscientious people, and we also promote them into leadership positions, and we're kind of scared away by people who are high openness. We like the good soldiers who follow orders, they're dutiful, they get shit done, rather than hiring the people who are creative, they're the innovators, they wanna blow shit up, and they challenge the status quo. They're gonna ask you a lot of questions. They're gonna challenge you to think very differently. And sometimes the leaders who are high conscientious and probably low openness see that as a threat. So it doesn't work in the workplace. And this is one of the reasons why We have so many organizations and leaders complaining and bitching that there's no creativity in organizations because we value conscientiousness at the expense of openness. Now, high openness, one other thing about it, it can also mean that you're pretty open about your emotions. So if you are high neurotic and low openness in that subdimension, you could be the type of person who has a lot of negative emotions, anxiety, and depression, and nobody knows it. If you are high in that subdimension of openness, in terms of the openness of your emotions, the emotional availability, everybody will know exactly how you're thinking and feeling. That's something with me. I'm relatively high in that subdimension. So if I'm annoyed by somebody, they're going to know it. If I'm really happy about something, people are going to know it. So sometimes that's really good to be transparent, but other times I've really had to work on regulating my emotions. And now, the final one, extroversion.
Extroversion is the trait that most of us know. No, it's not just about being sociable. It represents our comfort level with engaging with the outside world. Extroverts are warm, friendly, and gregarious with both friends and strangers. They can also be quite assertive. Introverts, by comparison, are not. But you know, they have the secret. They are fabulous at watching and learning. And importantly, they know better than to approach or interact with random strangers. Because, well, the human race has become a total disaster, quite literally.
The biggest thing I want you to take away about extroversion is it's not just this general idea about being social and having friends, but it takes into account how you generally relate to the outside world and the people in it. So, for example, are you naturally warm? Are you friendly? Are you gregarious? Are you outgoing? And are you socially adventurous in those types of environments and with virtually anyone? Now, if you're an introvert, this is something that you might need to practice depending on, the life you want to have and the career you want to have. I know for me, I don't have much of a social game. I'm yappy, but I'm socially awkward and a bit of an introvert. And I'm funniest, sadly, when I'm being sarcastic because I have a cutting sense of humor, not appropriate in all situations. So I'm going to give you a tip for building better relationships and maybe making more friends inside and outside of the workplace. And this comes from a communications influencer. I've used her YouTube videos actually for the last several years in some of my classes on communications, but I want you to hear how she talks about it and what she has to say.
There was a study that was done that looked at the cool kids in school. Why are certain kids so well liked and certain kids aren't? And what they found, they did this across a variety of high schools and a variety of ages from ninth through 12th grade. And they found there was one single predictor of who will be the most likable, most popular kid. And it was that kid had the longest list of people that they liked. In fact, be free with your likes. The most popular kids were the ones who were first likers. In other words, they walk down the hallway and they say, "Hey, Dan. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Joy."
Yeah.
They're the ones who walk into a class and be like, "Hey, you want to sit with me?" They are inviters. They are likers. They are looking for good.
Kind of cool, huh? And pretty simple. Try doing as I've been doing lately, and it's been working. And worry less about being super interesting or funny or charismatic because I'm really none of those things. Just try and be warm and kind and friendly and sincere and interested in people, and that will go a long way for you. So don't make it complicated. Don't feel this need to do something exceptional to stand out. Just be a good person. In today's world, that's really cool too, and in some ways in short supply. But it's the easiest path to be likable. One notable subdimension one notable subdimension of extroversion is assertiveness. And this is a subdimension that I score really high on. And it's why my overall score for extroversion is a little bit higher than I would naturally think because I consider myself a little bit more of an introvert. But because I'm assertive and I'm passionate about ideas and solutions and people, you couple that with my relatively high openness and my super high conscientiousness, and I'm just sort of a bundle of energy and passion and my mouth just gets dragged along in the process. It's not like I'm naturally social. Now, I have to make sure to keep my low agreeable tendencies, which I used to have more in my younger days. I have to keep those under wraps because when you have that high energy and low agreeableness, that can cause a grating personality that people don't want to work with. But since I've worked on the agreeable part of myself, and I am naturally empathetic anyway, I've managed to package myself a lot better into the type of person that people want to work with. So I'm the type of person that when I'm on teams, I'm usually pretty yappy, I'm pretty passionate, I bring a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. I'm the guy that's usually picked, even when there's no leader, to act as the leader and speak on behalf of the group because I seem to have, all of the ideas, figured out. And, I have a deep understanding of the topic because I have that high subdimension in openness, right? But it's not like I want to be the leader. I'm usually a little bit more, introverted. Even doing this YouTube channel, it's not like I want to have my face all over YouTube. God, no. But I have all of these things I want to share. I know a lot about human behavior and how that, works in the workplace and in our careers and in our personal lives. And I want to share that information. I have perspective that others are not bringing to the table, and I feel that you guys can benefit from it. That's why I'm doing this channel, not because I want to be famous or I just want to be talking all day necessarily. So it's kind of interesting as we have now surveyed all the different personality dimensions, at least, cut across them to give you a certain amount of information, that we're pretty complex. These personalities all work together. They have different layers, they have different textures. I'm hoping you're starting to see how these personality dimensions and subdimensions work in you and maybe in others. It's kind of fascinating. And trust me, as we work through this channel, we're going to dig into them even further. But hopefully, this has been a really healthy start. Is there an ideal personality for the workplace? The short answer is no. It completely depends on the kind of job that you have. So, empathetic jobs need people who are high agreeable, low neurotic, and high conscientious. If you work on Wall Street or Bay Street in Canada, maybe high conscientious, low agreeable. But if you want a hyper generalization for business, you might want to have this kind of profile, especially if you have some interest in leading people. So, you probably want to be higher in conscientious. You want to be higher in extroversion. Although we're becoming a little bit more tolerant of introverts in leadership positions, so there's some flexibility there. You want to be generally low in neurotic. You want to have at least a medium degree of openness and at least a medium degree of agreeableness. But again, that really toggles in either direction depending on the type of job that you might have. But that's just a generalization. If any of you want to leave comments about the type of job that you work in or the type of career that you want to have, I can give you a rough profile. But for many types of jobs, and I've done this with students, and I've turned this into actually school projects for them to do a personality test and then compare where they're at with what their career demands. We have found that there's a fair amount of research out there. Like if you want to be an accountant, you can probably Google it or do some academic research, and it'll give you a personality profile. Different types of careers and jobs will serve that up for you. So it might be a worthwhile exercise for you to undertake to do the personality test, get your scores, and then see what is really important and necessary in your career. But if you want some help with that, please leave a comment and I'll do my best to help you out. Personally, I would give everyone that I hire a Big Five personality test and incorporate a discussion of the results into interviews. But you can also use this test for yourself to figure out what your value is that you can offer to employers. Because you know what? It's not just about what degree you have, it's not just about how much work experience you have. It's not just about the knowledge that you have, although all of those things are important. But what can make you really attractive to employers is the way that you work. And your personality is a part of the Mars model, as I've presented to you, that explains to us how we perform and how we get outcomes. So here's what I recommend you guys do. I would go do the test if you haven't done it already, and then analyze the results. Just don't look at the generic, interpretations of the results that you get on a personality test. Really think about it. Look at your dimensions and your subdimensions. Come up with behavioral examples that validate your personality. See it in action in your actual behaviors, especially as it relates to how you work. And then get a job description that represents something that you want to be doing in the not too distant future and line the two things up. You should instantly be able to identify personality based strengths and also areas of development. So, you want to champion and promote these strengths throughout the application and interview process. And you also want to show at the right time that you have a development plan that you are implementing. So, you want to think about that part. How can you work on different habits to change your personality a little bit and make them more suitable to be a better long term candidate, right? So, think about your strengths, think about your development, and start to implement a behavioral change development plan. So, for example, if you discover that you have great teamwork abilities, you're empathetic, you're creative, you're intellectually curious, employers are into all of this stuff, right? So, this is the stuff that we're not thinking about when we're putting our resume together. And employers will love this. Why? Because they love people who think about themselves. They love people who know of themselves and they can communicate that to the employer. So you're communicating who you are and the value that you bring. So when you get a question like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, you can give a lame answer like, well, I'm hardworking. My weaknesses are that I'm a little bit impatient. These are like the standard stock answers that nobody wants to hear. But if you answer differently and say, well, I took a personality test. Let me tell you about the results and why I got those results. Let me tell you about how I work. Let me tell you about these awesome things that I do that you're really going to appreciate. And let me also tell you how I'm working on myself. So again, I can be somebody who's going to be better and better in this organization for years to come. You're hired. Why? Because you're self aware, you're driven, you're intellectually curious, you love to learn about yourself, and you're able to communicate and open your Johari window. If you remember that term from a previous video, you can share who you are and let them know what to expect. And a lot of those things, because you all have value that they should expect, are positive things. I promise you, this stuff works. Please leave comments. Do this entire exercise, apply it. I want comments on this video of people talking about how they've discovered some of their value and they've been able to better communicate it as a result of understanding personality and doing the personality test. Honestly, you guys, personality is one of the coolest topics in the Mars model. It's not like it's all downhill from here, but hopefully you enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed talking about it. Get out there and do the test if you haven't done it. And as I said before, ignore the generalized commentary that comes with the results. Really reflect on it. Try to imagine your personality-based behaviors. See the value that you have right down to the subdimension level. And then maybe even look around and observe people around you in your personal and professional life. You might be able to pick out personality-based behaviors. Post comments on this, share your observations, ask questions. I will get back to as many people as possible. We are going to chatter about this topic and revisit it a lot in this video series. In the meantime, please keep learning, keep thinking, keep growing. Dare to see yourself for who you really are. You are all wonderful and have a lot of value. But above all, please just keep it moving. Let's do this again in more videos to come. We're absolutely on a roll. So I will see you guys soon in the next video.